All right, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Engineering Major, Philosophy Minor. This is going to be the third video of the night. The reason why I'm kind of making videos on a little YouTube bender here is because I'm, of course, going to be visiting my family for the holidays, and I probably am going to take a step back from making videos during that time frame. Of course, I'm not going to take a step back from reading books and reading the news and stuff like that. But yeah, I probably won't have time to record, and I won't have all my equipment, obviously, where I'm traveling to, so that kind of makes recording difficult anyway. But really fast, of course, EMPM is the channel where you can get a working aerospace engineer's opinions, perspectives, rants, etc. on topics pertaining to engineering, philosophy, politics, and various other social issues. Today, I kind of want to take the engineering, sciency, and political perspective to this article about climate stuff that just got put out by The Hill, and it talks about Joe Biden's apparently ambitious plan for climate change and whatever woke buzzwords he wants to use. So I think I'm going to read this whole article and probably react to the whole thing. So let's just jump into it right now. Biden rolls out diverse climate and energy team to enact, quote, ambitious plan. So right off the bat, the headline just kind of bothers me. I know that the word diverse in here is probably used to refer to gender diversity and ethnicity diversity and country of origin type diversity. You know, and then when you're talking about two things like climate and energy, which have a very strong scientific and engineering component to them, immutable characteristics in terms of diversity are really of no value, to just the hard science. Now, on the other hand, if this means diversity of thought, that is definitely useful. Perhaps diversity of thought that solar and wind are not the only solution to mitigate climate change. Perhaps diversity of thought that maybe we should look at the climate change data and actually think about how much we can affect and actually think through whether or not our predictions truly make any sense. But of course, that's not what they mean by diverse. President-elect Joe Biden on Saturday rolled out his nominees for key climate and energy posts, touting his team as the right group to lead the government's ambitious plan to address climate change. All right, let's hear about your ambitious plan, Joe. Biden touted his team's experience and diversity, describing it as barrier busting, and said his nomination signified the seriousness with which his administration would tackle the existential threat of our time, climate change. So let's talk about this for a second. What about barrier busting has anything to do with climate change? Like, why does it matter if it's like a Native American person versus a white person versus a black person or whatever working on the existential threat? There's literally no scientific qualification to that statement. It certainly doesn't matter to me. Hey, you know what? If you're a Hispanic person out there and you come up with a golden solution to climate change, put it forward. If you're a white person out there, put it forward. If you're a black person, put it forward. If you're a Filipino person or a half or a mix like me, put it forward. Who cares what race these people are, right? But by the way, we have seen that John Kerry is going to be the climate czar, whatever that means. And he's just another old white politician. So, and is he supposed to be leading it? Like, is that what the czar does? Just dictates what everybody does. I don't really know, but I think that's a little bit counter to touting the diversity, Joe. Oh, here we go. A nice quote. Folks, we're in a crisis. Huh? Just like we need to be a unified nation in response to national response. No, but seriously, let's read it. Folks, we're in a crisis. Just like we need to be a unified nation in response to COVID-19, we need a unified national response to climate change, he said in remarks from Wilmington, Delaware. Oh, so he's still hiding in his basement. Cool. We need to meet the moment with the urgency it demands as we would during any national emergency. So this is the thing about So the thing about the Democrats lately that is just so annoying is like everything is just horrible and an existential threat. And it's so negative, and they're just crying about stuff. Like, what's urgent about climate change? You know, like the recent predictions are saying, you know, over the period of 100 years, something bad is going to happen. And what that awful thing is, no one knows. I mean, right? Oh, well, sea levels are going to rise. Okay, so maybe we'll just build better levees, or maybe we'll just stop building so close to the water, or maybe we'll just put everything up on stilts like they actually did in Seattle. It's actually Seattle, the construction of Seattle is actually a really impressive engineering feat, because originally the Seattle was like at sea level, and so when the tide would come in, it would just like wash all the sewage back into the city. So like literally what they did was they just like raised the level of the downtown area like by 10 feet or something like that. So you know, presumably we could actually do that again, and we could just abandon like lower floors of buildings and just like repurpose stuff that way. Anyway, now we're going to hear about goals. The president-elect laid out his goals, including creating 1 million clean energy jobs in the auto industry and implementing a carbon-free electric sector by 2035. To all the American people, yes, the goals I've laid out are bold. The challenges ahead are daunting. But I want you to know that we can do this. We must do this, and we will do this, he said. Wow, that's really inspiring, Joe. So the government's going to create 1 million clean energy jobs in the auto industry? What are you talking about, man? Like, let's talk about Tesla for a second. So, just because the Tesla itself runs on electricity doesn't mean that every process that goes into creating the car is clean, right? You got to get lithium for the lithium ion batteries from somewhere. You have to run giant pressing machines in order to, you know, do the plastic form, I say plastic. I don't mean like plastic, like, you know, this kind of plastic, as in super plastic forming of the aluminum that forms the frame, right? You've got to run these giant robots that weld everything. You've got to run the things that produce the tires. You've got to mine all the raw material in order to get aluminum and steel and all this stuff. You've got to get precious metals for the electric motor. You've got to get precious materials for the batteries, as I just mentioned. Like, so when you say clean energy jobs in the auto industry, like, what does that even mean? And the auto industry, I mean, you need energy for the auto industry, but are you creating clean jobs like with energy or in energy or in the auto industry? And carbon-free electric sector by 2035, 15 years from now? It just doesn't make any sense. Climate change has emerged as one of the thorniest issues within the Democratic Party, with Biden, a centrist, Biden's not a centrist, favoring a net zero emission economy by 2050 and resisting a ban on fracking, while progressives press him to take more serious action, including passing the Green New Deal, which looks to eliminate fossil fuels by 2030. So Joe Biden definitely has not resisted the ban on fracking. On many occasions, Joe has said that he is going to get rid of fracking. And then in the debate, he said he was going to get rid of oil. Now, let's talk about the Green New Deal, which looks to eliminate fossil fuels by 2030. Do you guys realize, like, people really don't appreciate, like, how much fossil fuels we actually use, right? This takes fossil fuels to make. This takes fossil fuels to make. This fork takes fossil fuels to make. This takes fossil fuels to make. This takes fossil fuels to make. The light is on. It takes fossil fuels to make. Forming this bag and filling it with nuts and harvesting the nuts takes fossil fuels to make. This phone takes fossil fuels to make. Everything takes fossil fuels to make. It takes fossil fuels to transport this from place to place. And if you want to, you know, if you want to make all the trucks or something like that electric, you're going to have to burn fossil fuels in order to get electricity in those trucks, because it ain't coming from all solar and wind. We've talked earlier on this channel about how inefficient solar and wind is relative to natural gas, for example. Natural gas is extremely clean burning, very low carbon emissions. By the way, the US only emits right now something like 15% of all the world's carbon emissions, and that's as a result of basically substituting natural gas and oil. But by the way, we still use a ton of oil because it's in everything else. Still, the president-elect has said his energy team will adopt an aggressive posture toward the global threat. Biden specifically touted the nominee's deep experience working in climate science and climate issues. Okay, you want to give an example of that? But more than their experience, Biden was quick to praise their diversity. So here we go, including Representative Deb Haaland, the first Native American tapped to hold a secretary post, and is picked to lead the Interior Department. I saw on the Michael Knowles show recently that actually the first the first Native American actually like held like a position in government like in it's like 1891 or something like that. Probably got to reread this next part without saying certain words. Quote, "This moment is profound when we consider the fact that a former Secretary of the Interior once proclaimed that his goal was to civilize or hurt us. I'm a living testament to the failure of that horrific ideology," she said, referencing former Interior Secretary Donald Grind, who served in the 1850s. Okay. "We know that climate change can only be solved by the participation of every department and every community," she added. "Coming together in a common purpose, this country can and will tackle this challenge." Well, it's kind of hard to come in with a common purpose when like half of us realize that it's actually like climate change actually isn't that big of a deal. Like it's really not. So an eye-opening moment for me when I was thinking about climate change, because several years ago I decided that I really wanted to dig into this, and you know, being an engineer, I wanted to really look at the data. I wanted to try and understand the models, and I came across a very interesting perspective, which is that, or not necessarily just perspective, but also kind of just a fact, which is that most of the places on the planet that are uninhabitable because they're too cold, not because they're too hot. And you know, since I've traveled to North Dakota and stuff like that for work, there's actually a lot of farmland in North Dakota, but right now, since it's winter, it's just empty. It's gone, right? Now, think about a place like Yuma, Arizona, where in the summer the temperatures reach 120 degrees, sometimes even 125 degrees. Also had to work out there earlier in the year, and several years leading up to this year, obviously. And there's food grown in Yuma, Arizona year round. You have to convince me that Yuma, Arizona is going to get too hot to grow food, but then at the same time, the upper latitudes are still going to be too cold to grow food during winter. If you want to tell me that climate change is really just going to like be super disruptive to like literally everything, just think about that for a second. Think about the idea that most of the uninhabitable places on the planet are uninhabitable because they're too cold, and just imagine a world where those places are just warm enough now that they can be habitable. Here we go. The nominees also vowed to keep social justice at the heart of their efforts, noting that communities of color often bear the brunt of climate change's impacts. In what way? Like, is social justice like a hard physical science problem, or is social justice just like a social problem? I mean, it's called social justice. Quote, "We will be driven by our convictions that every person in our great country has the right to clean air, clean water, and a healthier life, no matter how much money they have in their pockets, the color of their skin, or the community that they live in," said Michael Regan, Biden's pick to lead the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. So immediately in this statement, he's saying many things that have absolutely nothing to do with carbon emissions. I mean, CO2 is not technically a pollutant, meaning you can breathe in a shitload. I mean, we're breathing in CO2 right now. You can breathe in CO2 and it won't hurt you. So saying clean air, I mean, the air is clean even with CO2 in it. Clean water. Well, we figured out the secrets to clean water a long time ago. In fact, we were figuring out clean water before climate change was ever even apparently a problem. The concerted efforts of basically private industry has managed to bring clean water or methods for purifying water, like around the globe, essentially, and a healthier life. Okay, well, climate change, regardless of whether or not climate change is happening, I'm still going to the gym. We will move with a sense of urgency on climate change, protecting our drinking water, and enact an environmental justice framework that empowers people in all communities. So, environmental justice is one of these words that, like, the left just completely made up in the Democratic primaries, primary debates. Who was the first person to say it? Was it Joe Biden, or was it? I want to say that was Mayor Pete, but you know what? I just what doesn't environmental justice doesn't mean anything. You know, like if I go on a hike with a fully white person and a fully black person, so there's three of us on the hike. You know, it's me, the black person, the white person, and then we come across a rattlesnake. The rattlesnake is equally likely to bite any three of us. You know, like so. What does environmental justice mean? Like, does that mean that the white person has to walk first all the time and check for snakes everywhere? And then he talks about protecting our drinking water again, which has really nothing to do with fossil fuel usage. I mean, we definitely figured out how to make like power plants and drive cars and have an insane transportation network and shipping and receiving network and airplane network and all that stuff with clean drinking water as is. So, what's there to really figure out? I mean, I get that there are places that probably still don't have the best drinking water. So maybe just get those places the cleaner drinking water. But by the way, if you want to purify water, that takes energy, and you're not doing that with solar and wind. If confirmed, Regan will be the first black EPA chief. Okay. No one really cares about that except for the left. The energy and climate nominees were just the latest batch of officials to be rolled out as Biden cobbles together an administration that, quote, looks like America. Oh, isn't that so inspiring? I didn't see on here, Joe. You didn't pick. I didn't see a Filipino person mentioned in this article. I didn't see any Middle Easterns on here. Oh, let's see. I don't see any Australians. I don't see any Chinese people, any Japanese people. So, I mean, it looks like you're just going to have to grow your administration, man, because I don't think it's diverse enough. I think you need more diversity. I think you need one person from every race on the planet, however many there are. I don't even know how many races there are. I think you need one from each race because, like, it doesn't really matter what their qualifications are or whether or not, like, they actually know anything about science or climate. Um, like, what matters is that you have met your diversity quota. All right, guys, so a little bit of ranting going on there. But the point I want to drive home, which I also talked about in an earlier video on this channel, is that, actually maybe in 2 or 3 videos on this channel, is that science doesn't care what race you are. The scientific method was specifically developed, and science progresses today and does experiments in this way and builds aircraft and builds ships and bridges and buildings and all this stuff. It proceeds along not considering race or ethnicity whatsoever. And it shouldn't, because if you're doing a calculation, for example, on whether or not a bolt is going to fail on some aircraft component or something like that, you should be doing the calculation the same way no matter what race you are. And if you're a different race and you're doing it a different way that gives you the wrong answer, then it's going to be the wrong answer no matter what race you are. And all this stuff was figured out, a long, long time ago. So anyway, guys, this is like a bunch of quotes from Joe Biden that don't actually say anything, and quotes from his other picks that also don't really say anything, really, like about science or about climate change or about why they're the best picks for the job. And I think that that's a little bit alarming, I guess, because these are the people who are going to just regulate away everything that you like, because essentially everything you like is built with fossil fuels, whether you want to admit it or not. Um, you know, you can't have plastic without oil. You can't forge steel without oil. You can't machine aluminum without some form of fossil fuel. You can't use a windmill to build another windmill. So think about that. So I hope this video gives you guys like a little bit of a perspective that, there are members of the scientific community and engineers and thinkers out here who, they kind of challenge some of the fundamentals and some of the assumptions surrounding the whole like climate change debate. And, a lot of you guys, a lot of people get called science deniers and stuff like that when they try to kind of refute some of the claims made by climate change activists and politicians and stuff like that. But what I want you guys to know, and this is something that I discovered a while ago, is that the quote unquote science behind climate change is definitely not settled. And, what tends to happen, especially with Democrats, is they turn it into a crisis in order to put people into fear mode and panic mode. So they stop like really thinking about what's practically possible and also what's just like a reasonable way to look at the issue. So again, I want you guys to think about this statement that most of the planet is most of the uninhabitable places on the planet are uninhabitable because they're too cold. And I think that if you just kind of ruminate on that statement a little bit and think about it practically, you'll realize that like a lot of these proposals for, apparently urgently meeting this existential threat, like you'll realize that it's not really an existential threat. It's not really as bad of an actual existential threat, if even an existential threat at all. And it also doesn't really demand urgency. So I guess we'll see what happens in California, because Gavin Newsom wants to completely get rid of gas cars by 2035. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, because gas costs in California are about $1.50 a gallon more than literally anywhere else in the country, simply because of Democrat environmental policy. Anyway, just throwing a couple little jabs in there at the end, but hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys have a wonderful and Merry Christmas. Let me just say this. I hope that all of you are able to be as social with your loved ones as you possibly can over the holiday break, whatever lockdown or situation that you might be in. Something that I think, I definitely took for granted, especially when we started wearing masks, is, just how much I love being able to see people smile. This is supposed to be the season of joy. So when you guys are exchanging gifts on Christmas or doing whatever meal you guys are having, I hope that the love and the joy is present around the table or wherever you guys are gathered around the Christmas tree. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, have a happy holiday, and I'll probably catch you guys maybe a little bit before New Year. So peace out. Thank you. Later.